welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited about this. We're using the Zoom platform instead of the Substack platform because the Substack platform will only take three people, and we've got more than that here. I'm hoping to go for about half an hour. Um, and live video for the editors.com. So, and I'm really thrilled to have such high quality contributors and participants and thinkers and writers and brains here. It's a privilege. So I'm going to be quiet and really try to just hopefully moderate and gain from your wisdom. Tamara, are you in Ukraine?
I am. I'm in
Um,
Kiev.
well, I'm going to let you go first then. So your piece said that America should almost at any cost defend Ukraine, and so I was hoping to press you on that.
I mean, I had 500 words, right? So and I tried to stick to it. So but there was some shorthand in my piece. But no, I don't think at any cost. But I don't think it's very challenge. I don't think it would be hard for us. Somebody else is doing the fighting here. So and Europe has paid more for the war than the U.S. has. U.S. has important capabilities that Europe can't provide, but we're hardly doing this alone. And so it's not at any cost. It's a sliver of our defense budget. And I think that the challenge in the Biden years was that Biden basically gave enough for Ukraine to continue fighting, but not enough to win. And I think if we were to be more liberal, not excessive, it's not about money. A lot of it has to do with permission, and a lot of it has to use weapons in various instances, hitting across the border into Russia and that sort of thing. So for a very small percent of the defense budget, I think we should continue. I think the costs, and it's the costs that I think are much higher than many reckon. I think the cost, not just in Ukraine for Ukraine, we don't have to do this for altruistic reasons. The cost for American leadership in the world, for the Western alliance, for the future of geopolitics, I think we should continue. So I think the small percentage of the defense budget that it's likely to be, that it will be, and the weighed against the incredible costs of losing now, I think it's not very hard calculus from my point of view. I know my fellow debaters here disagree about a lot of those assumptions, and we can step back and talk about some of those imponderables. Can we split Russia and China? Will Russia abide by a ceasefire? Will Russia invade Europe? I mean, I think those are really the questions here that have to be answered, but I'll stop for now.
So yeah, Dom, maybe you could jump in. You think that this idea of trying to split Russia from China is doable. Adrian, who's not here, but who is one of the contributors to the online forum, said basically the Russians are too smart for that. They know that the minute the Democrats get in, they'll undo that. And why is he wrong about that
I don't
assessment?
know if he is
I can
wrong about
defend that
that.
position too when the time comes.
I don't know if Adrian is wrong about that. I think I did point out that the United States now has two foreign policies depending on who is in power, and that this is an unsustainable situation, which is going to wreak disaster for the United States and probably on lots of other states as well, especially those which have been in its train historically, because they no longer know where the train is heading. As for what Tamar just said, the future is unknown. All of it is unknown. None of it is imponderable, though. It seems to me that this is not the highest priority for the United States. I don't believe that the future of democracy is at stake in the war in Ukraine. And I do believe, however, that there's very little support in Europe for the open-ended war which she is describing, and let alone the stepped up, as she calls it, more liberal war, which she wants. The question of whether it is affordable within American defense budgets is a whole different one. I'm sure the money can always be found down the back of the federal sofa. The really important questions are not whether it can be afforded or whether you get other people to fight your wars for you. It is whether those wars really achieve what you want to achieve in the world. And I don't believe that prolonging the Ukraine war is going to do that for the United States or for NATO or for the Europeans, and quite possibly also for the Ukrainians.
So can we talk about some of the bigger things? Because I think, I mean, maybe David has to go first, but well, I'm sure, I mean, Ira, you tell us what to do. I mean,
No, no, Tamar, plunge right in.
go back. Okay. So Europe, sure, there's division of opinion everywhere, but European governments seem to strongly believe that if Russia, if there is a truce, a ceasefire of some kind, a treaty of some kind, whatever it's going to be, Russia will violate it, within minutes, certainly years, minutes maybe, and years certainly, and that Europe will be next. And European governments strongly believe this, and maybe you
Which,
don't, but again,
which
these are one of
European
the
governments are these?
well.
Because they do come and go, you know. There is no
Well, they
fixed
do indeed.
attitude in these
But
things.
yeah, but right now we have some governments and they are taking a position and they're prepared to reach into their purse to help. And indeed, they're prepared to some of them seem prepared to put men on the line. I don't think it's going to be enough. Like, let's not be alone. We do
I
need,
can assure you that Britain has neither the money nor the men to make a substantial difference
they don't have to make a
in a
substantial, they have to
post-Ukraine
make
mechanism.
some difference.
Oh,
They
I'm
have to,
sure.
yeah,
So
well,
David got at this a
yes.
bit in your piece about, assessing the Russian ambition. And I think
Well,
that is, you wrote that because of the demographics of Russia, uh, they just they're not really aiming to reconquer
well,
Germany. So how
Hitler.
confident are you in that? And
Well,
what if you're wrong?
what if I'm wrong? Well, Hitler told us exactly what he wanted, which is Lebensraum in Eastern Europe, and he
but
went
that's
and
not what
tried to
Russia
take
wants.
it.
That's not what Russia needs
Uh,
or wants.
uh, Russia now has 88 million working age adults, and by the end of the century, on the core UN projection, they will have 48 million. Their working age population will fall by roughly half. They have all the land in the world, but not enough Russians. And for the past 20 years, I've argued in print that Putin's biggest concern is the 22 million Russians who were left orphaned, as it were, by the breakup of the Soviet Union in the near abroad. That's why he went to war in Georgia and the Southern Caucasus, and that was the one of the reasons for the war in Ukraine. Russia, as a country, has a raison d'etre to protect Russians, and the Russian-speaking provinces were an existential interest for the Russian state, as many of our diplomats recognized. The second reason, of course, is just as we didn't like Russian missiles in Cuba in 1962, Putin made clear why he didn't like the prospect of NATO missiles within a few hundred kilometers of Moscow on the border with Ukraine. So uh, Henry Kissinger and any number of other statesmen warned that pushing Ukraine into NATO would lead to war. I don't think Putin was right to invade Ukraine, but he certainly had compelling reasons. So the idea that there's going to be a Russian march into Western Europe is ridiculous. It's simply innumerate nonsense. No country, we're back to Sparta in the 6th and 5th century BC to find an example of a country constrained militarily by demographics. And the
Why
reason
does everyone in
strategists don't
Europe
talk of
fear it? I mean, first of all, Russia's never been motivated by Lebensraum. They've always had enough.
well,
They've always had
because
enough territory. They've always had enough territory. They have
because
imperial ambitions that have
the,
nothing to
the
do with
Europe,
Lebensraum.
I think,
It's a
hold just a
different
second,
logic.
Tamar.
when you say ambition, that's an empty
Yeah.
word. It's pure rhetoric. The facts on the ground, the numbers do not correspond to it. As for the European leaders, some of them have staked their political careers on the war and would look like idiots if it were to shut down. So they will continue letting people get killed in order to preserve their appearances.
Ukraine, nobody's
Not for the
letting
first time.
Ukrainians get killed. For Ukrainians, this is an existential fight that they will fight
Well,
to the end.
yeah,
And with US help, without US help, they will fight to the end.
Ukraine is.
Nobody's making Ukraine join Europe. Nobody's
Oh,
dragging
okay.
Ukraine into Europe, and nobody is making Ukraine fight. And I mean,
It
let's
is,
step back.
Tamara, it
Step
is, I
back.
agree with
I
you,
speak,
but
listen,
I
it's
don't think
really
we should
hard
help
enough
them
to
do
fight
it.
with both of you, but to be
I
spoken
mean,
over and
honestly,
not be given a chance to speak makes it impossible. So,
well,
please, can I have a few minutes to say something? You had a long
Please,
time.
I
please.
think you interrupted
Um,
him actually, but go on.
yeah,
um,
I do have one other point to make, but go ahead, Tamara.
Let Tamara.
So, I mean, the one thing we're not talking about is, really, do you guys think that Versailles and Yalta were were good decisions, were done right, were good moments in history? The big powers
That has
carved
nothing to do with
Europe over
us.
their heads. It has everything to do with it. Why should Russia get to decide whether Ukraine gets to join the West or not? Ukraine wants to join the West. Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, they all want to join the West. They're
Excuse me.
willing, they're
What do you mean by the
dying,
West? Do you
literally
mean?
dying. They
Well,
NATO and the EU and trying to build democracies and trying to build open market economies. They're
these are
literally
three. You
dying.
described three different things there:
There
NATO,
are
the
three
EU,
different
and the
things, and they
market
want all of
economies,
them. And they
and you
want
haven't
all of
mentioned
them.
the United States, without which there
Well,
is no West.
it
So
is typical
That's
of
another issue.
wars. It is typical of many wars that most casualties are incurred after all hope of victory is gone, and wars only end when the fanatics who want to fight to the death have had the opportunity to do so. Best example is the American Confederacy. Ukrainian nationalism is an existential cry of despair. It's a dying country. It had
82% of
52,
Ukrainians are willing to fight on with or without American help.
if they
82%.
want
Maybe
to,
that's a
well,
figment.
let them do so. But I have absolutely no intention of
And you
encouraging
think
them.
Versailles and Yalta worked out great?
Oh,
these are entirely different questions,
this
aren't
is
they?
I don't think they are.
I think that's irrelevant. That's a rhetorical question. It's not a practical one. The second practical issue I wish to address is we have in our stupidity created a monster. We've modernized the Russian economy. We've produced the best army in the world. Eric Prince has a brilliant piece on this today on the Asia Times website. Remember, Russia produces more
They have
engineers than we
no
do.
real significant IT
No,
innovation.
no,
They have
no,
nothing. They
no.
can do nothing but make missiles, and they can't make enough missiles and
Russian
drones.
fat
They're bringing them in from
tomorrow.
North Korea and
No,
China.
no, tomorrow. Russia's industry, Russian factories are now crawling with Chinese engineers who are raising
Those
Russian
people you're
factory
determined to split them
automation
from. Those people you're determined to
to
split them from.
leave the red herring aside. Whatever we do in the future with Russia and China, which is a separate question, what we have created now is a military industrial machine that outproduces and outguns us. Russia is more powerful than we are and has beaten us through electronic
Well,
warfare, through
that's our
production of
fault, not theirs.
155 millimeter shells
That's
across the
that's our
board.
fault, not theirs. And why do they have to bring all the 155 millimeter shells
Of
from
course,
Korea?
of course, it's our, well, why not?
But they can make them if
But
they can make them.
according to Estonian military intelligence, they outproduced NATO 7-1. In addition,
Well, NATO's
they imported some. There's no
somehow
question
somehow
that
NATO.
Russia is
Yeah.
outproducing us. We went into the war with no idea of the state of our industrial base. It turned out to be woefully inadequate, both here and in Europe. And the Russians have modernized their economy and become a
They
major industrial
modernized their
power
military
with,
production. They
no,
haven't
no, it's
modernized
the,
their economy.
no, it's,
I-
they've automated factories just as we modernized our economy in World War II and went right out of the war into a dominant position in the world economy. Russia's industrial machine has vastly improved. So we've created a monster. We have lost. So as a practical matter, we should cut our losses and not lose further, because the longer we
And
keep
how's
this us,
what's
the
China going to
bigger we're
make of
lost.
this? I mean, this is Afghanistan on steroids. This makes Afghanistan look like child's play. What's
It's
the
worse than
Transatlantic
Vietnam.
Alliance going to make of
It's
this?
the
Oh,
it's
it's
the
a
biggest
disaster. Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
biggest strategic disaster in American history. There's
If
no
you don't, retreating would be
and no,
giving up now
continue
would
it
be.
will make it worse. And
Well, that's
who
your view.
just as Vietnam,
I think a lot of Europeans would differ.
just
I think they would differ with you
uh,
profoundly, particularly the
well,
leadership, say, of
uh,
Germany, for instance, the largest economy in Europe, which hasn't
Not
wanted a prolonged
anymore.
war from the
Not
start. No, no,
anymore.
no. They
They
will
just
say
want to
one
double
thing, but no,
down.
no, because words cost nothing. I'm afraid I don't wish to sort of tag team this, but I believe David is correct. And what you are saying is we're in a hole, and so let's keep digging. I don't think there is the support or the
No.
capacity or excuse, let me finish. There or the sincere commitment to fast rearmament or even ability to do that the Europeans are talking up. Therefore, the only way this war will continue is with increased American supply, and that's going to be more waste and I'm afraid more death, and will make any chance of any kind of Ukrainian state coming out the other side of it's much less likely. If you want to achieve a Ukrainian state on the other side of this war, you need to stop it rather than prolong it and carry on the
Fortunately, none
destruction
of
of the
us are
people
making
and
the
their
decision.
infrastructure.
Fortunately,
No,
none
that's
of us
not an
are
answer.
making
I'm
the
afraid that is
decision.
not an answer. That's
I'm
a
not
glib
finished.
and fatuous thing to say.
Well, you
I
said
raised a
if
very
I
serious
want
point.
to.
You are
You said if
you are
I want
you are
to.
encouraging people. You
I'm
are
not going to insult.
encouraging.
I'm not
No, no,
insulting
no. It
your
is. You can't
observation.
sidestep it that easily. You wish to continue a war which is destroying the people and destroying the state you claim
Not
you
my
wish to
decision. It's
preserve.
their decision. They
No, you're
want to
very keen
continue
on
the
that.
war.
You're very keen that the United States and NATO allies and the European Union should prolong a war which is destroying Ukraine. And yet you
Ukraine
say you
wants
wish to
to
save
continue.
it.
Ukraine will only lose more men if America walks away. If America will help them, they are convinced, now maybe they're wrong, but they are convinced that another 9 months, year of fighting, Russia will tire and give up. Now maybe they're wrong, but they are willing to make that bet. And I don't think it's that, I think it's worth our while to let them do that, not impose a peace on them.
And yeah, so Dominic and David, let me press on that. I mean, how bad does it look to the rest of the world for America to basically surrender Ukraine the way that it did Afghanistan? And what does that message does it send to the people who are eyeing Israel and Taiwan um and or to wherever Putin may go next? I mean, it seems sort of counter historical to 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 think that Russia is going to be satisfied with half of Ukraine. I mean, why wouldn't it just try to take the other half now that it's shown that
well,
like
I
America
can give you
is not
I
gonna
can
defend it. And then once it has
if
that, I mean, I understand the demographic argument, but it seems to me that like failing countries are um they're not necessarily peaceful. Like you know, and these efforts to draw the line, like, you know, in Afghanistan, we were supposed to draw a line around Kabul or whatever. Like it just once it becomes clear that there's no military muscle behind it, it all starts to deteriorate very quickly, right?
well, I can give you three reasons why Russia will not want to occupy all of Ukraine. The first is it would take well over 1 million troops to occupy the western half. They've been hard put to put 700,000 in the field in eastern Ukraine. They don't have that kind of manpower. Secondly, in eastern Ukraine, they have a Russian-speaking and to a great extent sympathetic population. The Western Ukrainians
No,
are Ukrainian-speaking, Uniate Catholics and really hate the Russians, so it would be a very difficult occupation. And third, there's nothing in Western Ukraine that they want. It's agricultural land. They already are the world's largest wheat exporter. There are no resources which they need. They have tons of agricultural land. Now, in terms of
So wouldn't
the
it be like a
impression
propaganda victory to seize the capital?
is that seizing the capital is certainly possible, but I think what Russia wants is everything up to the Dnieper River and maybe Odessa if they can get it. They'll probably settle for less, but
That
that's a
includes
separate
the
question.
capital.
The but the bigger question is the one you properly raised, which is, doesn't this make us look like idiots? And I think the fact is we already look like idiots because we were beaten by a second-rate power.
We're
We
not
had
it.
we have lost that war, and the longer we keep going, the more we lose it. Vietnam in 1975 did us an enormous favor. They humiliated us before Russia did. We responded by inventing smart weapons, the digital age, transforming the US technical economy, and we won the Cold War after that humiliation. And I hope that we will take this humiliation and do the same thing again and transform our military and become once again the most powerful in the world.
I don't think there's anyone in Europe that will trust us, that will want to ally with us. I think that Europe has a long way to go. Mr. Green is not wrong. It's easy to talk. They're not armed yet. But I mean,
Well, when you say Europe,
Forget the
my
transatlantic alliance.
my good friends in the Alternative für Deutschland are now polling at 24%, and the CDU is polling at 25%. The populist parties, the mega Make Europe Great Again parties, are now very close indeed to power. And the people you're talking about who will never trust us, the old Atlanticist elite, are moving out of power. So I think we have
So maybe
people
this is
like
really what
Viktor
we should be
Or.
talking about sorry, I didn't know that you were a supporter of AFD. That puts the whole debate in a
I,
new light.
I'm not a
Um,
German, so I'm not a supporter, but I have friends there and we talk about things all the time. I've interviewed a number of them in Asia Times.
okay,
And
well, I mean,
and
again, I
I
think that
tend
puts the
I
whole this puts the whole debate in a very new light for me. I mean,
so I believe
I don't know
there
what your
what I'm saying
your
to
listeners would think, but
what I'm saying, Tamara, is that we have in Europe people, a new political leadership developing with whom we can indeed work. Viktor Orban being my favorite guy in that respect, and many other people like him, Geert Wilders in Holland, uh,
And
and
aren't those guys sort of Russia friendly? I mean,
yes,
I mean,
indeed.
I mean, how is that?
they no
How
They're not in power yet at the moment.
they are not Russia friendly. They're Bismarckian. Bismarck always said that the key to German security was peace with Russia. He was never friendly to Russia, but he wanted to avoid war. The AfD is the only party in Germany that now calls for a return of military conscription. Everyone else is against it. If you poll the Greens, only I think 9% of them say they would be willing to fight to defend their country, but 70% of AfD members say they'd be willing to fight to defend
Who
their
are they going to
country. So if
fight once
you,
they're in power? It's not going to be Russia.
well,
I mean,
if you're worried
who are they
about
arming
Russia,
against?
if you're worried about Russia, or then you should want political allies in Europe who are willing to fight for their countries, unlike the Greens and unlike the CDU, who are a bunch of cowards.
I
It's
mean,
the patriotic
all
parties.
this makes it sound, I mean, if the alternative is like a highly armed Germany, it kind of makes the case for maybe another year or two of American backing
Well,
for
you're going to get a
the
highly armed
Ukraine.
Germany, we hope, in any case. I mean, Europe, we all hope that Europe is I mean, I think we all hope. I certainly hope that Europe is rearming seriously, and it does have to
Uh,
include Germany.
and
And whatever the
President Tr
historical echoes are, they're still the economic powerhouse in Europe.
okay,
And
West Germany at the peak of the Cold War had 500,000 men under arms, 12 battle-ready divisions, and 7,000 main battle tanks. It was one of the strongest armies in the world. Uh, I don't think we're going to go back to 500,000 men under arms, but it's the patriotic parties, the mega parties in Europe, who are willing to defend their countries, and the rest of them just talk about it.
Okay,
So I
so
think
I mean, we have 4 minutes left, right, or something like that. Let me just say, I don't think we're going to decide a lot of these things, but the one thing maybe we can agree on, or a basis for some agreement, and then 4 more minutes of conversation, is that the transatlantic alliance is important. You both seem to think that. I think that abandoning Ukraine now will spell the sure end of the transatlantic alliance. You differ?
I would say actually keeping going is going to break it, actually. I'd say it's the other way around. A lot of these new parties that are coming to power in Europe are not intrinsically hostile to the United States or intrinsically amiable to Russia. They're very aware of where they are. And therefore, it's entirely possible to revive and update the Atlantic Alliance. I think it would be very sensible to declare a limit to the borders of Europe, the European Union and NATO, which are two forces which have yet to declare a limit to their territorial ambitions. The
Because
European
they
Union,
because
no,
they're
haven't.
based on self-determination of the countries that
I
want to join.
see. I see. So Turkey, for instance, wishes to join the European Union. You think that that's going to happen?
Probably not. But it's not
No, there
because
you go. So
it's
the opinions of the
because
people
there
who
are
want to
rules
join
and there
are
are
not actually
conditions.
decisive. They're not decisive at all. The
that's
reason that Turkey
it's
has not joined is because the rest of the EU states do not want it, actually. So it's nothing to do with what the
Doesn't
people
meet the
want and has
conditions.
everything to do with what the most powerful members of
and
the organization
if I
want to
could just
do.
one sentence, Tamar, you seem very confident about what the Ukrainians want, but since Zelensky refuses to hold presidential
Oh,
elections,
there's
it's
no
kind of
possibility of
difficult to
holding
know
elections. Well, okay,
why
yeah.
not?
In
Why
wartime, it's
not?
very difficult to hold an election. Britain didn't hold an
It's
election
it
during World War II.
Yes, it did.
America did.
Yes, it did. You can
America
America
did
answer to
during
did.
the
that.
Civil War. We had elections during the Civil
Yeah,
War.
well, that's
There's
there weren't missiles that
the,
could reach polling places, and
Britain held an election
it,
in 1945 while the war was still going on.
that is no, the difficulty is no excuse for delaying elections, and it's very difficult for anyone to claim to know the mind of the Ukrainian people when they haven't had an opportunity to go to the polls.
All right. Well, so we're almost at an end of the time here. I thank everyone for participating. Um, maybe just one last sentence and thought from each of the three of you quickly, and then I'm gonna wrap us up. Uh, Dominic, why don't you go first?
One thing we didn't get back to that you'd raised, Ira, is, what does this mean for Israel? What does this mean for Taiwan? And the answer is, well, the disaster and the precedent have already happened. So worrying about how this will look to the world, it's too late. That should have been thought about 2 years ago when the Biden administration was rushing in without an exit plan. We are already past that watershed, and therefore the question is, how are you going to reconstitute a credible security system in Eastern and Central Europe? The idea that this is going to be done simply by producing a democracy in Ukraine isn't actually relevant to that, because the Ukrainians can't do that themselves, and it requires everybody in Europe to actually start thinking seriously. They have started thinking and perhaps even talking seriously about it, but the gap between that and the action will mean the United States may well actually find it has to increase its commitments in Europe in the coming years, even though it keeps trying to focus on the only serious challenge it faces, which is, of course, from China. So the Ukraine war is a pivotal, disastrous moment, unquestioningly.
David, final thought?
We lost this war in the factories of Europe and the United States. We went in without an understanding of the logistics and the industrial requirements and the military technology, and we got our heads handed to us. So we should take that lesson and take the opportunity to rebuild the arsenal of democracy and make American military technology the unchallenged leader in the world. Thank you.
So I
Tomorrow.
don't disagree that we should make America an arsenal. I don't disagree that Europe should strengthen its defenses. I don't disagree that the its alliance is important. But I don't agree that we've lost this war. Russia thought they were going to take Ukraine in 3 days. It's 3 years later, and they've taken a little sliver of land in the east that they didn't have before, and they've lost casualties, nearly 1 million men dead and wounded. So I don't accept that we've lost this war, and they've strengthened their
I challenge your
military.
numbers.
I've strengthened their military production, but that's far from building a modern economy. So I think we didn't really try to win this war. We gave an ally, a small, weak ally, enough to hold off the enemy. We didn't try to win the war, and I think without a huge escalation, we arguably could try at least not run away from a disastrous defeat that I think would redound all over the world. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran would all be emboldened in ways that they haven't been so far. So, I think time will tell, right? It's been a great conversation.
All right. Yes. Great conversation. Thank you all for being here. Check out theeditors.com for more of this lively diversity of viewpoints.